Let's go now to Philip Rycroft. He was Permanent Secretary of the Department of Exiting the EU. Philip, welcome to the Spectator TV. Was it always going to be this difficult?
Not necessarily. It's not surprising that it's been quite tough. And it's an important relationship for both sides, probably the most important relationship, certainly on trade, but also on issues like internal security and so on. So there's a huge amount to play for. But of course, we have these big arguments of principle, which are causing the blockage now. And that has been described already. On the one hand, the UK saying we left in order to be able to set our own rules. On the other side, the EU saying you want privileged access to our market, obligations come with that in the way that you manage your own regulatory environment.
But since this is now, even if we get a deal, it looks like it's going to be a pretty skinny deal. It's not going to be this Canada plus that we were talking about. It may not even be Canada. We've been calling it Canada Dry on this. If it is so skinny, why is the EU insisting that we remain aligned in so many ways with whatever the EU does?
Well, it is in contrast to being in the single market. It's a skinny deal, but as a trade deal, it would be one of the more advanced that the EU has done, particularly, of course, on tariff and quotas. That would be the big win. No tariffs and quotas for UK businesses trading with the EU and vice versa. And the EU side has said all along through this, and this isn't a new position, you're not like Canada, you're a lot closer, you do a lot more trade with us, and we are therefore commensurately more worried about you trading unfairly with us. That's the position they've taken. We have to remember that the single market is essentially the jewel in the EU crown, the legal construct that gives life and meaning to being a member of the EU, which is why they protect it so fiercely. The EU as a construct is designed to look after the interests of its own member states, not of third parties. And that's hence the caution in seeking to strike a deal with a close and important trading partner like the UK.
So when it came to the free trade deal with Canada, and although that was not entirely tariff-free or entirely quotas, it was a pretty, a lot of stuff, the tariffs came away and the quotas came away. It was a pretty decent, as free trade deals go, this was a pretty decent and extensive free trade deal. Yeah. But the EU did not insist that Canada's state subsidy regime had to fall in line with the EU, although there had to be dynamic alignment of Canada's rules and regulations with the EU. I think a lot of British people won't understand why you insist, yeah, well, we're closer, but so what? Most of our economy is services, and services are not geo-specific. They won't understand why the British are being treated differently from the Canadians.
Sure, and obviously that's been a big part of the arguments all the way through this, and the assumption on many people's part that the EU is being unreasonable. In a way, from you looked at from where we are now a third country. We want this privileged access to their market. Of course, the EU is perfectly free, sovereign, if you like, to set the conditions for that. And I come back to the point, the concern, as I understand it, and I don't speak for the EU clearly, is because of the proximity, and proximity still matters in trade terms, and because of the volume of trade, that they worry about the UK stealing a march on EU-based businesses by allowing a different set of standards to emerge either side of the channel.
But the EU runs a massive trade surplus. Well, actually, it runs an overall current account surplus with the UK, but it particularly runs a massive trade surplus in traded goods with the UK. It would have to be one hell of a change in Britain's rules and regulations to dent that very much. I mean, this is not a straw man.
Well, I wonder, actually, from both sides of this argument, whether in 3 or 4 years' time, particularly if we land up with no deal, we'll look back and think, what was all that fuss about? If you think about it, exactly your point, it would take some really big divergence in standards to have a material impact on trading conditions. But if you look at it from a UK perspective, the government's already said we'll accept non-regression, so we're not going to lower existing standards. And if you think on things like environment, the government dead keen to push on climate change. So improving standards is a good thing. And even if our standards are somewhat different from the EU's, when you roll forward 5-10 years' time, it seems very likely that the EU and the UK will still be running similar levels of standards, because that's what developed, mature, civilized, modern economies will do. The one thing that stands out of that, of course, is state aid, where the UK has been very insistent on freedom to spend more money supporting businesses. Paradoxically, because it's always been the UK that has been the biggest proponent of control of state aid at the EU level. And France and Germany, within the rules, still spend a lot more money on state aid than the UK does. So one again has to question the motivations there. I mean, I speak as somebody who was a civil servant for 30 odd years, worked quite a lot on the business side of things. The state, at the end of the day, is generally not the best place to determine which are the winners in the future economy. In other words, the UK moving into a position where it wants to splash a lot of taxpayers' cash around on businesses, sort of shades of the 1970s and British Leyland there. And I wonder again in 3 or 4 years' time, will people will look back and say, wasn't that a bit of a red herring, to coin another phrase? So fisheries, I think we can sort out, by the way.
I never thought I would see a stumbling block for a Tory government to be the right to dole out lots of state aid.
Exactly.
But have these talks from the start, Philip, been characterized by a certain mutual incomprehension?
Yes, and I think also a lack of trust. And I think that lack of trust has been there all the way through, but was exacerbated, of course, by the UK Internal Market Bill. Happily, now those clauses that offended the EU and indeed other international partners have now been withdrawn. But I think there has been this mutual incomprehension on the EU side, what has driven Brexit, and from the UK side, a misunderstanding of how the EU operates and where the deep concerns of the EU lie. And that's just not been very helpful throughout all of this. And is perhaps a signal also of the way in which the UK, through our membership, never really got sort of integrated into understanding the operation of the EU in a way that's second nature to the countries that are more core to that enterprise.
If we were to leave on no deal, in your view, would there then quite quickly, and by that I mean sometime next year, maybe after the summer, would there be a move then to try and reopen the talks and do a free trade deal again, try and get that done? Or would relations actually, both sides may be so angry that relations could end up in the freezer for quite some time?
Yeah, 3 quick things to say about that. One is that the EU and the UK will have to talk about stuff from here on forever, whether we like it or not, including fisheries, common resource. The fish don't respect the median line. They don't get spawned as a British or a French fish. The stocks move around. You have to manage these resources in common. And there'll be loads of other stuff where we have to talk. Second point, this relationship is too important, both on trade and on internal security and on a bunch of other things, not to formalize the relationship at some point. But third point, I agree with you when you say that the risk is, if we have no deal at the end of this year, tempers will be such and political pride will be such that neither side will be willing to be the one that says, oh, we need to get first, we need to get back round the table. So it could be some time before negotiations resume to put the relationship on a sound footing.
When you stand back a little bit from trying to work out whether we're going to get a deal or no deal and get away from the incredible detail that goes into these talks, whether you were for Remain or whether you were for Leave, when you look at how close the EU and the UK, how many areas we will need to cooperate in the 2020s and beyond. Our common interests as well, in or out of the EU. You know, it's our biggest market. We have a common interest in the Eurozone doing well, whether we're in the EU or not, in defense and security and intelligence, and just standing up for democracy and human rights. We have so much in common. We are free traders. You know, we don't want tariffs if we can. If we don't get a deal, is it not really depressing that two sides with so much in common just couldn't do a bloody trade deal?
Yes, and actually a failure of statecraft on both sides after 4 and a bit years not to be able to manage that. And let's not, even though the deal that's on the table, as you described it earlier, is quite a thin deal, no deal is damaging. It's economically damaging for both sides. The application of tariffs in terms of automotives, agri-food and so on, even for fisheries, is very damaging. All the other agreements fall away, like on internal security, on research and all the rest of it. Even Australia, I know that people talk about Australia as the no-deal destination. Even Australia has a number of deals with the EU. We would only have one, the withdrawal agreement. If you think about short-term disruption at the border in a no-deal world, what is the incentive on the part of the EU authorities or the French authorities, the Belgian authorities to play nice? But just one final thought on this, which is, I think, hugely important for the UK. We've got some really rather important elections coming up next year in Scotland and Wales. And we know where opinion is at in Scotland on the question of independence. We know that Brexit and feeling about Brexit in Scotland has been a bit of a driver for that. A no-deal Brexit, it seems to me, exacerbates concern within the UK Union about our future direction as a country. And somebody lives in Scotland and a lot of work in Scotland, that worries me immensely.
Well, you used to work in government in Scotland, so let's finish on Scotland, because if you look at what it's taken, and we're not there yet, to unravel a 50-year arrangement, which wasn't it, despite what a lot of the Brexiteers said, in many areas wasn't that deep. I mean, what is it? And we're still 4 years out and we've still not left yet or even come to a deal. If Scotland was to vote for independence in a second referendum, I mean, the mind boggles at what these negotiations would require, unraveling 300 years of union and countries, economies, cultures, peoples who have been totally integrated everywhere you think. I mean, they're not going to happen very quickly either.
No, in a word, I absolutely agree with that. And we sort of peered over that cliff edge back in 2014 when the referendum on Scottish independence came quite close. Of course, notoriously, the Prime Minister of the day, David Cameron, didn't allow us within Whitehall to do any contingency planning for that eventuality. But what I can say is behind the scenes, particularly after that famous Sunday Times poll that put the yes side ahead, there was a bit of scurrying around in the corridors of Whitehall to think, how on earth do we cope literally on day one of that result? But you're absolutely right. We did a huge amount of work describing the benefits of the UK Union for all parts of the Union. We had about 14 or 15 tomes from everything from defence through to the social security system, to culture, to movement of people and so on. Dismantling all of that would be an absolutely huge challenge and would be for the British state, for the remainder UK, would be a distraction from everything else that we wish to do for literally years. When Brexit happened, of course, again, we didn't do a lot of contingency planning for that either. But we know from the experience there just what a massive task that was, which started the day after the referendum and is far from finished now. But Scottish independence would make all of that pale in comparison.
Well, Rycroft, with that thought, the mind boggles. We'll leave it there. We thank you for your time and expertise being on Spectator TV. And we wish you a very Merry Christmas.
And you. Thank you very much.